Most people think they do not change because they lack motivation. But that is not the real reason. Because you have been motivated before. You have had moments where your chest felt alive with possibility. You have stayed up late imagining a different version of your life. You have watched a video, read a quote, made a promise, written a plan, and felt, for a brief moment, like everything was finally about to become different. And then life returned. The same room, the same phone, the same habits, the same distractions, the same quiet disappointment at the end of another day where nothing really moved. You told yourself you would start tomorrow. Not because you were lazy, not because you were broken, but because something invisible kept pulling you back into the person you already knew how to be. That is the part nobody talks about. Change does not fail when you lose inspiration. Change fails long before that. It fails in the hidden decisions you barely notice, the small negotiations, the private excuses, the environments that keep shaping you, the identity you keep defending even while you claim you want to escape it. And if you do not understand this, years can pass while you keep believing your breakthrough is just one perfect moment away. But the truth is much more uncomfortable and much more freeing. Because once you see the real reason you never change, you can no longer unsee it. Number 1, you wait until you feel ready. The first door to change is guarded by a feeling most people worship without realizing it. You keep waiting for the right emotional weather. You wait for the morning when your mind feels clear. You wait for the season when life becomes less stressful. You wait until your confidence arrives, until your schedule opens, until your fear quiets down, until your energy finally matches the size of your dreams. And in your mind, it feels reasonable. Because how can you begin when you feel uncertain? How can you take action when you still doubt yourself? How can you build a new life when the old one already feels exhausting? So you postpone. Not forever. Just until Monday. Just until next month. Just until things settle down. Just until you feel ready. But readiness is one of the most convincing disguises fear has ever worn. It does not always sound like panic. Sometimes it sounds mature. Sometimes it sounds responsible. Sometimes it sounds like planning. It tells you, wait, prepare more, think it through. You are not there yet. And because the voice sounds intelligent, you obey it. The hidden problem is that the feeling you are waiting for is usually created by the action you are avoiding. Confidence does not come before you begin. It grows after you survive beginning. Clarity does not arrive while you sit still. It appears after movement gives your life feedback. Courage does not knock politely on your door one morning and say, "Now you may start." Courage is built in the moment your hands are shaking and you move anyway. This is the internal conflict. A part of you wants transformation, but another part of you wants certainty before transformation begins. And certainty is impossible at the starting line. You want proof that it will work before you commit. You want evidence that you will not fail before you try. You want to feel like the person you are trying to become before you have earned the habits of that person. But life does not work that way. A seed does not wait to feel like a forest before it breaks open in the dark. It simply splits, quietly, vulnerably, without applause, without proof. And that breaking is not failure. It is the first act of becoming. Think of a person standing at the edge of cold water before sunrise. They know the water will shock their body. They know the first seconds will feel terrible. So they stand there negotiating with themselves. One more breath. One more minute. Maybe tomorrow. But the water does not get warmer because they wait. The only way to become the person who can handle the water is to enter it. That is how change begins. Not with comfort. Not with certainty. Not with a dramatic emotional breakthrough. It begins when you stop asking, "Do I feel ready?" and start asking, "What would the next version of me do even while feeling unready?" That question changes everything. Because it separates your future from your mood. The old version of you treats feelings like permission. The new version treats feelings like weather. Sometimes useful, sometimes intense, but never the ruler of your life. Imagine waking up tomorrow and not waiting for the perfect state of mind. Imagine doing the small difficult thing while doubt is still sitting beside you. Imagine realizing that fear did not disappear, but it also did not stop you. That is the first real evidence that you are changing. Not because you suddenly feel powerful, but because you acted without needing to feel powerful first. And once you understand that readiness follows action, another uncomfortable truth appears. Even if you finally start, you can still stay stuck if you are building your life around the wrong thing. Number 2. You focus on goals instead of systems. Once you stop waiting to begin, the next trap appears quietly, because it looks like ambition. You set a goal. You want to lose the weight, build the business, become disciplined, save money, learn the skill, change your body, transform your mind, prove to yourself that you are not the person your past keeps accusing you of being. And for a while, the goal gives you energy. It gives your pain a direction. It makes your life feel less random. It turns frustration into a picture of the future. You imagine the finish line, the result, the moment when everything finally makes sense. But then the days begin. Not the dream, the days. The boring Tuesday, the tired evening, the slow progress, the invisible effort, the moment when nobody is watching and the goal feels far away. This is where most people break. Not because the goal was wrong, but because the goal was never designed to carry the weight of daily transformation. A goal can inspire you, but it cannot live your life for you. The hidden problem is that goals create desire, but systems create reality. A goal says, I want to become this. A system asks, what do I repeatedly do when nobody cares? That question is less glamorous. It does not look good in your imagination. It does not give you the same emotional high. But it is the difference between a life you dream about and a life you actually construct. They want the house, but not the blueprint. They want the harvest, but not the soil. They want the applause, but not the quiet repetition that makes applause possible. And because they focus only on the goal, every day becomes a test of emotion. If progress feels fast, they continue. If progress feels slow, they doubt. If they miss one day, they feel like they have failed. If the result does not appear quickly, they start believing the entire journey is meaningless. But a system changes the relationship. A system gives you something to return to. It says, even when I feel behind, I know what to do next. It says, even when the result is not visible, the process still counts. It says, I am no longer asking every day whether I feel inspired. I am following a rhythm that carries me when emotion disappears. Think of a river cutting through stone. It does not break the mountain in one dramatic moment. It does not shout. It does not rush to prove itself. It simply returns. Again and again, with quiet pressure, with patient force, with a commitment so consistent that even stone eventually yields. That is what systems do. They make change less dependent on dramatic effort and more dependent on designed repetition. You do not rise to the level of your biggest dream. You fall to the level of the structure that holds your day together. This is why two people can have the same goal and live completely different lives. One person dreams about becoming fit but keeps snacks beside the bed, sleeps late, and waits for motivation. Another person prepares their shoes the night before, chooses a simple workout, removes friction, and repeats the routine even badly. The difference is not desire. The difference is design. And this is where clarity becomes uncomfortable. Because once you see that your daily system is producing your current life, you can no longer blame your results only on bad luck, low motivation, or not having enough time. Your life is not only shaped by what you want. It is shaped by what you repeatedly make easy. So the question becomes sharper. What does your current system make easy? Does it make distraction easy? Does it make avoidance easy? Does it make excuses easy? Does it make the old version of you the most convenient option? If so, your goals are fighting against your environment, your habits, and your default patterns every single day. And most goals cannot survive that battle alone. But when you build a system, even a small one, something changes. You stop depending on emotional explosions. You start trusting ordinary discipline. You begin to understand that transformation is not a single heroic act. It is a quiet machine you build into your life. A machine that keeps working even when your mood does not. Imagine a future where you do not need to restart every month. A future where your progress is not dramatic, but steady. A future where the person you are becoming is no longer a fantasy, because your days are finally shaped to produce that person. That is when change becomes real. But even the best system has an enemy. And it is not laziness. It is the soft, familiar cage you keep returning to whenever growth begins to hurt. If these ideas are resonating with you, take a moment to reflect on what system has been shaping your life without your permission. Share it below, because someone reading your words may recognize their own struggle through your honesty. And if you want to stay connected to reminders like this, subscribing simply keeps this kind of growth in your path when you need it most. Number 3, you are addicted to comfort. After clarity comes the place where most transformation quietly dies, because comfort rarely feels dangerous while it is stealing your future. Comfort is not always rest. Sometimes comfort is the familiar pain you know how to survive. It is the same scrolling habit that numbs your mind, the same excuses that protect your ego, the same routine that disappoints you but never surprises you, the same relationships that keep you small because at least you know your role in them. And that is what makes comfort so powerful. It does not always feel good. It simply feels known. You may hate where you are, but you understand it. You know how to move inside it. You know how to explain it. You know how to complain about it. You know how to survive another day in it. Change, on the other hand, asks you to enter unknown territory. It asks you to become a beginner again. It asks you to risk looking foolish. It asks you to sacrifice the emotional pleasure of immediate relief for the quieter reward of long-term respect. It asks you to leave a cage that has become familiar enough to feel like home. That is the hidden problem. Many people do not stay stuck because they love their situation. They stay stuck because the discomfort of growth feels more threatening than the discomfort of regret. Regret is slow. Growth is immediate. Regret whispers at night. Growth confronts you in the moment. Regret hurts later. Growth hurts now. And the human mind often chooses the pain that can be postponed. So you reach for comfort. Not because you do not care about your future, but because your nervous system wants relief now. It wants the snack, the distraction, the easy choice, the familiar conversation, the old identity, the soft exit from pressure. And every time you choose comfort over growth, a message is sent quietly through your life. Not loud enough to shock you, just strong enough to train you. The message says, when things get hard, we retreat. Over time, this becomes a pattern, then a personality, then a destiny you mistake for who you are. But comfort is not evil. Rest is necessary. Peace is necessary. Recovery is necessary. The problem begins when comfort becomes the manager of your decisions. Because comfort has one mission: keep things the same. It does not care about your dreams. It does not care about the person you could become. It does not care about the regret you may feel 5 years from now. It only cares about lowering tension in the present moment. Comfort is a beautiful servant, but a terrible ruler. Picture a ship tied safely to the dock. No storms reach it there. No waves test it. No unknown waters threaten its structure. From a distance, it looks protected. But a ship that never leaves the dock slowly loses the reason it was built. That is what comfort can do to a human life. Preserves you until it imprisons you. The perspective shift is this: discomfort is not proof that you are on the wrong path. Often, it is proof that you have finally stepped beyond the boundary of your old life. The burn in your muscles is not failure. The awkwardness of learning is not failure. The silence after choosing discipline is not failure. The loneliness of outgrowing certain habits is not failure. It is withdrawal. Your old self is losing control, and it does not leave quietly. That is why early growth feels so strange. You are not only building new habits. You are breaking an addiction to the version of life that required the least from you. And the way forward is not to chase suffering for its own sake. It is to practice choosing meaningful discomfort on purpose. A difficult conversation instead of silent resentment. A focused hour instead of another night lost to distraction. a walk outside instead of lying in the same thoughts, a small act of discipline that tells your mind, we do not run every time life asks us to grow. This is how commitment is born. Not in words, in repeated proof. Imagine becoming the kind of person who no longer fears discomfort because you understand its language. Imagine feeling resistance and not immediately obeying it. Imagine building a life where comfort is something you enjoy after effort, not something you use to escape effort. That is a different kind of strength. But the moment you begin to choose discomfort, another test appears. Because growth does not reward you instantly. And if you do not understand the next trap, you may quit right before the first real evidence arrives. Number 4, you quit too soon. This is where momentum is either protected or abandoned, because most people misread the quiet middle of change. At the beginning, change has emotion. You feel hope. You feel urgency. You feel the fresh energy of a new decision. The first steps feel meaningful because they are connected to a story you desperately want to believe about yourself. But then the beginning ends. The music fades. Nobody congratulates you for doing the basic thing again. Your body still looks the same. Your bank account still feels small. Your confidence still comes and goes. Your mind still argues. Your old habits still call your name. And suddenly, change feels less like transformation and more like repetition. This is the point where many people quit. Not because they are incapable, but because they expected progress to feel more obvious. The hidden problem is that growth often works underground before it appears above the surface. You may be changing long before your life looks changed. Your discipline may be forming before your results show. Your identity may be shifting before other people notice. Your strength may be developing in the exact season where everything feels slow, unrewarding, and uncertain. But because you cannot see it yet, you assume nothing is happening. So you stop. And then you tell yourself, I guess I am just not consistent. But maybe consistency was being built, and you left before it had enough time to prove itself. This is the internal conflict of momentum. You want evidence before patience. But patience is often what creates the evidence. Think of bamboo. For years, certain bamboo roots develop beneath the ground with almost nothing visible above the surface. To someone watching impatiently, it looks like failure, empty soil, wasted effort, no movement. But underground, a structure is forming. Roots are spreading. Strength is preparing. A foundation is being built for growth that would collapse if it appeared too early. Then, when the time is right, the bamboo rises with astonishing speed. People call it sudden. But it was never sudden. It was hidden. Your life may be the same. The days you think are not working may be the days that are preparing you to hold the results you keep asking for. But quitting too soon destroys the invisible work. You never get to meet the version of yourself that would have appeared after the boring middle. You never discover whether the effort was closer to working than you thought. You never find out what your life could have become if you had stayed with the process just a little longer. And this creates a painful cycle. Start, hope, struggle, doubt, quit, regret, restart. Every restart feels like a new beginning, but deep down, it also carries the memory of past abandonment. So the next time you try, you trust yourself a little less. That is the real cost of quitting too soon. You do not only lose progress, you lose self-trust. And self-trust is one of the most important currencies in personal change. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you deposit proof into your identity. Every time you abandon yourself when it gets hard, you withdraw from that account. Eventually, you do not believe your own plans anymore. You write goals with a quiet suspicion that you will not follow through. You say, this time will be different. But some part of you whispers, will it? The way forward is not to promise yourself a massive transformation overnight. It is to become the kind of person who finishes small cycles. One workout, one focused session, one honest conversation, 1 week of showing up, one commitment completed without drama. Momentum is not built by intensity alone. It is built by completion. When you finish what you said you would do, something inside you stands a little taller. You begin to trust your own voice again. And when self-trust returns, change stops feeling like a fantasy. It starts feeling like a relationship you are rebuilding with yourself. Imagine reaching the moment where you no longer quit just because progress is quiet. Imagine staying through the invisible season. Imagine looking back months from now and realizing the boring days were not wasted days. They were foundation days. That realization can save your life from becoming a collection of almost. Almost started. Almost committed. Almost changed. Almost became. But even if you stay long enough to build momentum, there is another force that can pull you back without asking your permission. Because sometimes the reason you cannot change is not only inside you. Sometimes it is the world you keep returning to. Number 5, you keep repeating the same environment. Once momentum begins, your surroundings will reveal whether they are helping you rise or quietly training you to return. You can make a powerful decision in the morning and lose it by evening. Not because the decision was fake, but because you walked back into an environment designed for the person you used to be. The same room that invites the same distractions. The same people who expect the same version of you. The same conversations that normalize the same complaints. The same digital world that pulls your attention back into comparison, desire, noise, and escape. And then you wonder why your willpower feels weak. But willpower was never meant to fight an entire environment forever. The hidden problem is that your environment does not ask for permission before shaping you. It shapes what you notice. It shapes what feels normal. It shapes what feels easy. It shapes what feels socially acceptable. It shapes what kind of person you become by repetition. You may think you are choosing freely, but many of your choices are being suggested to you by the spaces you inhabit. A messy room suggests delay. A phone beside your bed suggests distraction. Friends who mock ambition suggest staying small. A home full of unresolved tension suggests emotional escape. A feed full of other people's lives suggests dissatisfaction with your own. None of these things force you, but they whisper, and whispers repeated long enough become commands. This is why change becomes so difficult when your environment keeps voting for your old identity. You are trying to become disciplined in a place that rewards impulsiveness. You are trying to become focused in a place engineered for interruption. You are trying to become confident around people who only understand the insecure version of you. You are trying to become new while everything around you keeps handing you the costume of who you were. That is exhausting, and it leads to an internal conflict many people never name. You want growth, but you also want belonging. You want change, but you fear becoming unfamiliar to the people who knew you before you started changing. You want a new life, but you keep returning to old rooms that make your new standards feel strange. Sometimes the hardest part of transformation is not building new habits. It is surviving the loneliness of no longer fitting where you used to belong. But this is also where a powerful perspective shift begins. Your environment is not just a background. It is a silent partner in your future. And if that partner keeps sabotaging you, something has to change. Not always dramatically, not always by cutting everyone off, not always by moving cities or disappearing from the world. Sometimes it begins with small acts of environmental rebellion. You move the phone away from the bed. You clean the space where you think. You prepare the tools for the habit you want. You spend less time with conversations that drain your ambition. You follow people who remind you of your standards. You create friction for your worst habits and ease for your best ones. You stop expecting yourself to become a different person while living inside a structure built for your old patterns. Think of a plant placed in a dark corner. You can yell at it to grow. You can shame it for being weak. You can compare it to taller plants. You can write goals for it. You can demand discipline from it. But until you change the light, the soil, and the conditions surrounding it, growth will always be a struggle. Humans are not so different. We need conditions. Not perfect conditions, but honest ones. Conditions that make growth possible instead of constantly making decay convenient. And sometimes, changing your environment is the first time you prove to yourself that your future matters. Because when you rearrange your world, you are making a declaration. You are saying, I no longer trust the old setup with my new life. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Imagine walking into a room that reminds you who you are becoming. Imagine having fewer triggers pulling you backward. Imagine being around people who make discipline feel normal, not extreme. Imagine a life where your surroundings quietly support the person you are trying to become instead of constantly negotiating with the person you used to be. That is when growth gains protection. But even with a better environment, one final prison can remain untouched. You can change your habits. You can change your schedule. You can change your surroundings. And still return to the same life if the deepest story you believe about yourself never changes. Number 6. You let your identity stay the same. After the environment shifts, the real battle moves deeper into the story you keep calling me. This is where change becomes personal. Because habits are not just actions. They are evidence. Every repeated behavior is a vote for a certain identity. Every time you avoid the hard thing, you vote for the person who runs. Every time you keep a promise, you vote for the person who can be trusted. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you vote for the person who is no longer controlled by the past. But many people try to change their behavior while secretly keeping the same identity. They say, I am trying to become disciplined, while still believing, I am the kind of person who never finishes. They say, I want success, while still believing, people like me do not really win. They say, I am changing, while still carrying an old self-image built from failure, criticism, shame, rejection, and years of disappointing themselves. And that old identity becomes the ceiling. You may rise for a while, but if you still believe you belong at the bottom, you will eventually find a way back down. The hidden problem is that people rarely act beyond who they believe they are for very long. You can force behavior temporarily. You can push through with pressure. You can perform confidence. You can imitate discipline. But if your identity does not change, the new behavior feels like a costume. And costumes are exhausting to wear. This is why some people sabotage themselves right when things begin to improve. The opportunity appears and they shrink. The relationship gets healthier and they create distance. The progress becomes visible and they fall back into chaos. Not because they do not want better, but because better feels unfamiliar. The mind often prefers a familiar identity over an unfamiliar blessing. If you have spent years seeing yourself as behind, broken, unlucky, undisciplined, or not enough, then growth can feel like trespassing into a life you are not allowed to own. That is the internal conflict. Part of you wants to change. Another part is loyal to the old story because the old story explains your pain. It gives your failures a name. It makes your past feel coherent. Letting go of it means facing a frightening question. Who are you without the excuse? Who are you without the wound as your identity? Who are you if the thing that happened to you is real, but no longer allowed to define the rest of your life? That question can feel terrifying, because identity transformation is not just about becoming more confident. It is about grieving the version of yourself you kept alive for protection. Maybe that version helped you survive. Maybe it kept expectations low so disappointment would hurt less. Maybe it taught you to laugh at your own dreams before others could. Maybe it made failure feel predictable instead of devastating. But survival identities are not always suitable for the life you are trying to build. At some point, the armor becomes the cage. Think of an actor who has played the same role for so long that the audience forgets the person underneath. Every day, the costume goes on. The lines are repeated. The same character appears. Then one day, the actor wants a new life. But the world still calls them by the old name. The hardest part is not removing the costume. It is believing they are allowed to exist without it. That is what changing your identity feels like. It begins with evidence, not fantasy. You do not stand in the mirror and pretend to be someone you have not practiced becoming. You build small proofs. You keep one promise. You complete one difficult task. You speak honestly once. You return after failure once. You choose discipline once when the old you would have escaped. And after enough proof, your mind begins to update. Not loudly, quietly. I might be someone who follows through. I might be someone who can change. I might be someone who is no longer owned by the past. That is identity transformation. Not pretending you are already perfect, but collecting undeniable evidence that you are no longer the same. Imagine reaching a point where discipline does not feel like punishment but alignment, where growth does not feel like pretending, but remembering, where success does not feel like something reserved for other people, but something your daily actions are teaching you to receive. That is when change becomes more than behavior. It becomes belonging. You begin to belong to the future you once only admired from a distance. But there is one final truth that decides whether all of this becomes real. Because even a new identity cannot fully stand until you take back the power you have been giving away. Number 7. You never take full responsibility. This final shift brings every lesson together, because responsibility is the moment you stop waiting to be rescued from your own life. This is the hardest truth. Not because it is complicated, but because it removes the hiding places. It is easier to say the timing was wrong, the support was missing, the past was unfair, the people around you did not understand, the opportunities never came, the world made it difficult. And sometimes all of that is true. Some people do begin with heavier burdens. Some wounds are real. Some environments are painful. Some disadvantages are not imagined. Some people have had to fight through things others will never fully understand. Taking responsibility does not mean pretending life has been fair. It means deciding that even if life was unfair, your future still cannot be left in the hands of what hurt you. That is the difference. Blame may explain where you are, but it cannot build where you are going. And many people never change because they confuse explanation with liberation. They can explain their patterns, explain their fear, explain their delay, explain their anger, explain their lack of trust, explain their inconsistency, explain why they are the way they are. But explanation alone does not transform a life. At some point you must ask, now what? That question is where personal power begins. Because the hidden problem is not that you have reasons. The hidden problem is when your reasons become permission to remain unchanged. You may not be responsible for every wound you carry, but you are responsible for whether that wound becomes a prison or a teacher. You may not be responsible for the environment that shaped you, but you are responsible for the environment you continue to choose. You may not be responsible for the first time you lost confidence, but you are responsible for whether you rebuild it. This is not harsh. It is freedom, because if everything is someone else's fault, then your life can only change when someone else changes first. Your peace depends on their apology. Your progress depends on their permission. Your future depends on circumstances finally becoming gentle enough to let you move. That is a powerless place to live. Responsibility gives the power back. It says, "This may not all be my fault, but it is now my life." That sentence can change a person. It does not erase pain. It does not make the journey easy. It does not magically solve every obstacle, but it places your hands back on the wheel. And for the first time, you stop waiting at the side of the road for someone to arrive with a map. You become the person who begins walking. But when the sun rises, a choice appears. They can spend every day cursing the storm, or they can begin clearing one piece of broken glass. Not because the storm was acceptable, but because the house is still theirs. Your life is that house. Some rooms may have been damaged by other people's choices. Some walls may carry marks from seasons you never asked for. Some memories may still echo when everything gets quiet. But it is still your house. And responsibility is the decision to stop abandoning it. This is the deepest form of self-respect. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs to prove anything. The quiet kind that says, "I will no longer participate in my own disappearance." Full responsibility means you stop negotiating with the truth. You look at your habits honestly. You look at your excuses honestly. You look at your environment honestly. You look at your identity honestly. You look at the years that have passed and the years that remain, and you refuse to let the next chapter become a repetition of the last one. This is where personal power rises, because you realize change was never about becoming someone else. It was about finally becoming loyal to the person inside you who has been waiting for you to stop betraying your own potential. Imagine waking up with that kind of ownership. Not perfection. Ownership. Imagine no longer needing life to be easy before you act. Imagine no longer using your past as a life sentence. Imagine becoming the person who takes the next step because the next step belongs to you. That is when everything changes. Not all at once, but in the most important way. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting for change. You become the source of it. And once that happens, the life you used to call impossible begins to look like something else entirely. It begins to look like a responsibility you are finally strong enough to carry. The real reason you never change is not because you lack potential. It is because your life has been organized around the old version of you. Your emotions waited for readiness. Your goals floated without systems. Your comfort protected your limitations. Your patience ended before momentum could mature. Your environment kept calling you backward. Your identity stayed loyal to an outdated story. And your responsibility was scattered across people, circumstances, timing, and pain. But now you can see it. And seeing it matters. Because awareness is the first crack in the wall. You do not need to rebuild your entire life in one dramatic moment. You need to stop abandoning the next honest step. You need to act before you feel ready. Build a system that supports the person you want to become. Choose meaningful discomfort. Stay long enough for invisible progress to appear. Change the conditions around you. Collect evidence for a new identity. And take responsibility not as punishment, but as power. The person you want to become is not waiting in some distant future. That person is being shaped by what you do next. Not what you say you want. Not what you plan to do someday. Not what you promise when emotion is high. What you do next. So when this video ends and the room becomes quiet again, the question will not be whether you understood the message. The question will be whether you are willing to stop being loyal to the life you keep saying you want to leave. Because change does not begin when everything finally feels different. Change begins when you decide that staying the same has become more painful than becoming someone new. If this message made you reflect, share the thought that challenged you most. Your honesty may become the sentence someone else needed to read today. And if you are committed to becoming better one day at a time, subscribe so these reminders are here whenever your future needs your attention again.